Welcome to episode 3 of The Dirty Corner. This podcast, as I always say, is about me discussing my experience as a student of fine art school and trying to share some stories which I think would be relevant for people, just in case you're either considering going to art school or you've been to art school or you just want a bit of entertainment and you're wondering what I'm talking about. I'm going to give you as honest an account as I possibly can of things that happened whilst I was there, to either to me or to people who I know and love, and it affects me and others. So I think they're all pertinent stories to give you background and texture to what's happened. Last week's episode was called Is It Okay to Kill People? Now that's a very inflammatory sounding or incendiary sounding title, but I think it was justified. If you didn't already watch it, then I will leave a link here. And otherwise, let's get on with this week's episode, which is film your food and stop drawing. This is another experience which I had directly. Episode 1 was something which I experienced. Episode 2 was discussing something which happened in a meeting and was more about the tutors and the ineptitude of that curriculum that we were subjected to. This episode is about what I experienced. This was in my third year, and I would be online, working from home, talking over video chats to tutors. It was during the pandemic, and some students were on campus, but the rules that were in place at the time were being broken, and I was concerned about that. There were students who were contracting COVID from a certain tutor who didn't follow the rules either, so I was concerned about that. But that's not what this is about. This is about how the education itself failed certain students, and I'm one of them, but I'm not the only one by a long shot. So basically the way that they would teach us, I'd say teach us, it's really a misuse of the word. The way that they would waste our time is to mention things but not talk about them. So if I were to say, when it comes to fine art, you have people in history like Picasso, and some may find that controversial as a figure, but Picasso is someone who was a big contributor to fine art and movement, and if you need to know more, you can look that up. I probably gave you more than what they'd give us. They would do it in a slideshow, and so they wouldn't really talk about the artist. They would talk very slowly. They'd put on a voice as if they're speaking to people who are, toddlers. And I found it really hard to take. And there was a lot of wasting time. I covered this in the last episode. A lot of chit chat, a lot of just mindless, small talk, instead of the actual education. Then there was entertaining the disruptive students. They were given all the time they wanted to say and do what they want. If a student had a background, on the Zoom chats we had Teams, you can change your background to look like something else. That was something that was given a lot of time, where I think it should just be perfectly permissible, but not something we waste more time on than we do spend or invest time in discussing artists or movements or careers or, significant pieces. And that was how I feel it went. So I did get the inclination from first year that I wouldn't be receiving the education that I initially went there for, which was to improve upon drawing and painting and sculpture and have guidance from experienced tutors and be among peers who are really pushing to do what they wanted to do better and have a bit of art history mixed in. This is all, to me, reasonable things to expect from a more academic setting when you're trying to grow as an artist. And none of these things, none of those 3 things that I mentioned were there. So I was disappointed from the first year. I was told by a tutor that we'd have drawing class every Tuesday morning, and it was wordplay. She was basically lying and using wordplay to try and entice me to be excited and prepared for drawing class when it wouldn't actually be drawing class. So that was an indication and a red flag which suggested that things would be quite bad. And it was. So what I started doing was bits of work which I know they wanted, but I would also submit the work that I wanted to make. And on this occasion, what I'm talking about is a time when online I had 2 tutors talking to me. One which was, she was just an unpleasant kind of person to deal with, because she was childish, unprofessional, and privileged because she was the dean's wife, so she kind of didn't have to do the work. The other tutor was a painting tutor. He was great, but he tried to keep his head down and just keep his career. And as much as I can understand why that is, because he wouldn't have been around, I don't think, if he would have stuck his neck out for the education, I'm also frustrated because what he offered was so much more than anyone else. And if it were the school that I expected to go to, it would have been by far the least that anyone could possibly offer as a tutor. So it shows the stark contrast between what we were paying for and what we received. And these are the 2 tutors I was talking to. I liked the painting tutor. I could talk to him. He was a nice guy. He's a good artist, and we had a common language, so we could speak about art comfortably with each other. The other tutor, you couldn't speak to her about art. She didn't really make art, and when she did, it would be copying someone else's art. That's what she did. And in this meeting, I was showing them what I'd done since the last presentation, the PowerPoint presentation they'd given us, which was about what we're doing in either lockdown and reflecting upon the time during the pandemic. It was something quite loose and vague. It was never specific enough, and whenever I'd tried to get anything more concrete to latch onto, they would just direct me to their online resources, which were again vague and poorly structured in my view. And what I showed to them was I'd done a portrait drawing, because I was going to portrait drawing classes and life drawing classes. So I showed them the portrait drawing, the life drawing, the fact that I'd been doing some writing, and also that I was filming my environment. But on this occasion, what I'd been doing was I would have a meal in front of me, and I would set up a tripod to be above me like this, and it would film directly down the plate of food or bowl of food, and I would scoop it and kind of hold the spoon out of the shot, and then, or fork or whatever it was, and eat the food and kind of cup my hand underneath it to catch any food that dropped. And I would do that until the plate or bowl was empty, and it would make a video that I could speed up and would be an interesting time lapse. And out of everything that I showed them, that's what got the feedback. That's what they liked. And I was encouraged to do more of that. And that to me was just an in-between scene. It was something which I was hoping to put as part of a film, because I'd been filming a lot of what I was doing, even though I wasn't doing much. If you film everything, the kind of mundane events of the day become scenes in a film. And depending on how you present them and different ways that you can film things, you can make something out of it. And instead it was just, film your food from above. Now, can you imagine if that's what I ended up doing for art because the tutor said so, and all of a sudden I was just filming food and trying to film things from above and do it as time-lapse videos and trying to build on that as a series of work. That's the type of thing I can imagine certain fine art exhibitions would present. And it's why I feel a little underwhelmed when I go to certain exhibitions that I feel have been heavily influenced by tutors who aren't really offering anything. Now, don't get me wrong, the tutors may not be into portrait drawing or life drawing, but if I were a tutor at art school and someone came to me with some kind of Dadaist type of work, I wouldn't say, right, where's the drawing? I would appreciate the approach of, their Dada work, because that's what they must be into. And you try to nurture the student's interest instead of saying, yeah, but where's my thing? I want to see my thing in your work. And that's what I really despised about my experience there, is that it was taking away from the actual potential value that could have been added. Things like filming your food. I mean, if they were going to encourage me to do that, then surely you just talk to the student about potential branches that could be explored from the route, which would be the video of the food, and kind of say, maybe consider this type of artist, or this could make you go this way. And if you like drawing, why don't you incorporate drawing certain snapshots of or whatever, because I didn't think of that back then. But if I were a tutor now, I would say, I actually like the food shots, and because you draw, I think you could pause the video, take a screenshot, draw that screenshot, and inject that into the video, and see how it looks to have the food disappearing, and a section of drawing, and then video goes again, another section of a drawing, and just interrupting it with the art that you're into, so that you're maybe transitioning into the drawn or painted work that you want to see, and combining that with the film. I mean, this is something which I've just thought of now, and that's something I would have valued and explored in university. But at the time, I was quite depressed because of what I've been through in uni. This is the third year, and I was confused because I thought, I want to be strong in what I like, and yet I don't want to seem like I'm just ignoring what they're saying, because I might be missing out on something which is potentially valuable. So I was trying to do a bit of both. So that's why I was thinking, I'll do the filming stuff because I can make art films, and I quite like making art films. But I also want to present the fact that I'm drawing and I'm painting and I'm trying to do bits of sculpture and I'm trying to make things that I find value in. But that was all just pushed aside. It wasn't even commented on. It was just quiet. And I'd be talking, saying, and I made this, and this is a drawing of the woman who runs the life drawing class, which, is on every, let's say, Tuesday. I don't know what day it was. And I do that every week. And this is some images from the life drawing class. And this is, a painting that I've started. And this painting is about this, and it connects to it this way. Aside from that, I made this video of filming the food. Oh, that's good. Oh, I like that. I just think, this is not what I want to do. This is not the art. The video is kind of like saying, I don't know, it'd be like saying, this is the paper that I'm going to draw on for life drawing. Yeah, oh, that's good. You don't kind of say that's the art. You say, okay, what are you going to do with it? Have you got a plan on the composition, or is the idea already there, or is it something you're going to work on? Is it going to be the sketch from life drawing that you're going to develop into something else? That would be the conversation that I would potentially have with the student, saying, you're going to these life drawing classes. Why don't you take these drawings and start to build a bit of a narrative? Again, I'm making this up. Never happened at the school. But instead it was just nothing. Even with the food, it wasn't discussed or explored. It was just, that's the only thing that got a reaction. Do more of that. Now, I'm not the only one who's got this story. Even the painting tutor himself said that he had that experience when he was in university in Scotland. And I've spoken to somebody in London and they said they've heard the same feedback from the art school in London. And I think it would be a bit of a coincidence if it were where I was in Wales, and then it happened in Scotland, it happened in London, and that's it. I've got a feeling this is endemic throughout the country, if not throughout the Western world. I wonder whether the East, the Far East, the Middle East, or, different regions diverge from this stunted kind of movement of fine arts that we seem to be stuck in. Because I see more promising results from Russia, Ukraine, China, I'm sure all over the world that isn't the Western world. I know there are ateliers and specific schools that you can go to and research that have different educations to offer. I didn't know this, but I still, even though that's the case, I still think the school I went to shouldn't be this bad. It shouldn't be like, well, all art schools are bad, and if you want something that isn't bad, you should go to a specific school. I mean, if I went to a drawing school and my drawing was a specific style, that should be honed and harnessed and nurtured to grow. It shouldn't be like, nope, you make the same mark as everyone else. That's what they suggest happens. I don't believe it. I honestly think that these other schools try to help people use what they have, as opposed to the school I was in, which was so narrow in its scope, and it didn't even deliver what it was proclaiming to be so invested in, which was a kind of Dadaist view of fine art. But it was odd. It was nothing. It was poorly delivered, and it was just frustrating because as a student you think, I'm trying to make a variety of types of art because there are different creative outlets. So I don't mind wandering into film because that's interesting. But I don't want to then abandon something I'm obviously interested in, which is the drawing side of art. And just because it's fine art and they think that drawing is for illustration, I don't think that's true. And I'm not the only one who doesn't think that's true. I think that's a real problem for specifically the UK, but I wonder whether it's beyond the UK as well. I think we're losing a lot of the education. There are other stories I'm going to tell about why I know that drawing is disincentivized at the school, because it's not just me. I was there to witness other people have terrible advice and awful feedback from the tutors and unproductive conversations with fellow students. But this is just an example where it was a suggestion of film your food and stop drawing. That's why this episode is called that. That's the feedback that I got from that. Not in those words, but what else do you take from it if nothing you show them gets any response except for the video of you filming your food? Now, I will show you the video on here. I'll be putting the video on top of this episode because I want you to see the food, and then I want you to see the drawings and the painting and the ideas that I was trying to present, as far as I'm just working on things, trying to find my feet. If food is the only thing that I've got to present, then it suggests that I'm wasting time with drawing. And I don't think that was true. I think I went to school to try and get a better education on drawing, but my suspicion is that none of the tutors, except one who left when I was in first year, or maybe it was second year, at the very start he left, he was a good draftsman, but otherwise I don't think anyone else could draw. Any of the tutors, even the painting tutor, I don't think was a draftsman. and he was by far the most talented artist of the fine art bunch, in my opinion and in my estimation of what I saw of their art. I'm saying that loosely because I only saw the painting tutor's art. I saw what the pompous tutor produced, as far as you'd see glimpses of what he did, and it was quite frustrating. I barely saw anything from the dean's wife. She was, as I said, struggling to produce anything of her own. The dean himself made some quite disappointing attempts at being a postmodern artist, and then the other tutor, who was a replacement for the sculpting tutor and did his own little sculptures, was quite a difficult personality to reconcile with a course that you feel should be mature and developed when it comes to diverse art making, and instead he was again lacking experience in any type of fundamental art making, and instead he was someone who thought, oh, just, do a bit of whatever with something and it's fine, isn't it? And it's not. I mean, I know that's such a vague thing to say, is do a little whatever with something, but imagine if it's, I feel like giving examples, because when I try to communicate with people, I want to communicate clearly, and that wasn't my experience with any of the tutors except the painting tutor or the tutor who left at the start of the second year, the sculpting tutor. Those two were good as far as they communicated fine, whereas with me anyway, whereas the other tutors, the replacement sculpting tutor, the pompous tutor, and the dean's wife tutor, communicated poorly. They would make statements. They wouldn't follow up on them if you asked them to elaborate on the statement. They would instead just avoid answering. They'd instead pose a question to you, which was a bit frustrating, because you wanted it to be a conversation and wanted to kind of understand better what they were trying to suggest. And instead they were trying to I felt like they were trying to ride on, I can make this statement and anyone who questions it, I'll just question them back. It just seems like a childish, pathetic way to operate. And I was so lost as someone trying to grow and build on what I already had, that I ended up drawing and painting worse by the time I'd finished the course than I did when I started the course, because it just deconstructed all of my interests and my efforts to the point where I had to relearn drawing, and I had to really invest time into getting better at this again. And I'm still working on painting more, because it's not something that's easy for me to pick up, even though I love painting. It's tricky. It's a really tricky place to find yourself when the tutors are just not giving you anything. It was an odd situation for not just me. And this meeting that I'm talking about in this episode was, as I said, just me with two tutors. I have a recording of it, but I'm not going to share recordings that should have been private. I'm going to share recordings that I'm going to protect the other party, like they do on television, so that they're not in any way likely to be identified, because that's not in my interest to kind of involve people against their will or without their awareness. But I do want my audience that are watching to appreciate things that I can show them evidence of. This meeting, I'm not going to do that just because it's not material enough as a meeting. It's kind of it's more, they gave me feedback on this one specific thing, so the video wouldn't help for that, really. It was literally just, I'd have to play the whole video for you to see how little I got until that point. And at that point it was just, yeah, that's interesting. And like I said, I've heard that that's what tutors do, is just let it become, that's all I need to say. All I need to say is that's interesting. Leave the student to do the rest. It was poor. It wasn't enough. And I don't think people like that should be tutors. I think people should be given the education they're paying for. £9,000 a year, maybe nothing in the future, but at this point in my life, that's a debt that I now have that I feel is unfair, because the education was only in name. There was no actual education I had there. I learned more about how to protect yourself against problems because of university than I did about anything to do with the course, or art making, or art history. They didn't teach any art history. They didn't teach you any techniques. It was just nothing. They just gave you nothing. This podcast now is about specific stories that I'm trying to tell. As I said at the beginning, I did talk about stories from university whilst I was still there with a co-host. That's on my channel. If you just search on my channel Studio Buddies, Buddies, Studio Buddies, that's a podcast that has, I think, 16 episodes, maybe 14 episodes, I'm not sure. And a lot of the time we talk about university until a point when we thought we need to stop talking about uni now because we do it so often. But that became a theme that we were both struggling with because we were trying to get through the course. And then we were trying to figure out why things were going wrong and why we were so surprised and disappointed by what we would be faced with each day. I dread it. I dread going into school. Imagine you pay to go to a fine art school, get the education, be among peers, and I'd be dreading it because the tutors were so bad. Because the education was just not there. And they'd just be saying, go on this platform, look at what we've posted. And there would be, this is the problem with the platform. It would be an online platform. You'd press the app or whatever it was to go on it, or the link from the university website to go on it. And it would load up. And first of all, you'd be facing, 20 different options of what to look at. So it took so long to go through it all and to try to look for where it was. They'd never tell you where it was. And if you actually figured out, okay, this is where today's stuff is, I would comb through it. I'd read everything on the page, and then I'd look at the link because there'd be hyperlinks that you'd press on and it'd load up a new page. And look at everything on there, download it all, look at it again and again. And then I'd go back to the original page, look for any more links, any more downloads. And it was nothing. Nothing was communicated well. It was, every day was like a riddle. But unlike, not a well worked out, clever riddle, it was just a problem. You just had a problem every day. And the problem was the education wasn't there. I don't want to keep repeating myself. That's something which I feel was oppressive. Now, this is just a story about one meeting where I feel my soul as an artist was being crushed because I wasn't able to explore and develop drawing, which I felt should be accepted, even if they wanted it to become abstract. That should be something which was open to me. But instead, they incentivized filming my food from above. So that's this episode. Film your food and stop drawing. Episodes will start to increase in intensity and will be a bit more disturbing, so I'm warning you now. As these episodes go on, you will find that some will be dramatically more eventful. So I'm kind of easing you in, just giving you little bits and pieces, but try to imagine yourself in my position. You're really invested in there. You've had 2 and a bit years of frustrating, disappointing, confusing, bizarre mismanagement and incompetence. And then you're trying to say, look, I've done the extra. I've done the work you like, I've done the work I like. And instead they just say, yeah, that's interesting. That's it. I've got an inkling of why that happened, but I'll discuss that in another episode. All of these stories lead to the Dirty Corner, which is why it's the name of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll see you in the next one.